Okay, so on to Introduction to Atoms Part 4. We learned in the previous one that we had two different types of atoms, a Rutherford atom and a plum pudding atom. So, sorry, the plum pudding atom was a theory, and so was Rutherford atom, actually. And after a little experiment with these things called alpha particles, we discovered that the Rutherford atom was more accurate than a plum pudding atom because it explains certain observations, namely that when we fire these alpha particles, most of them did go through, just like we would have expected with the plum pudding model. However, not all of them went through. Some of them were deflected, and some of them were in fact bounced back. So this could only be explained using the Rutherford atom. So if we look closely at a model of the Rutherford atom, you can see why some are bouncing back, and also why only a few are bouncing back, because the nucleus of the atom is tiny in comparison to the rest of the atom, and so it only produces just a tiny amount that are able to bounce back. The rest of them will go through undeflected, and a reasonably small amount will be deflected and just bend off to the left or to the right. So that's what they noticed. They didn't see what we're seeing here. We're seeing the explanation of it. They just saw the results of the detector. They had detectors all the way around this gold foil here, and they saw, yes, it went. There was a detector here that maybe I can just draw on. Maybe I can just draw using Zoom Annotate to demonstrate what I mean. Okay, so they had this detector, and they expected most of them just to be around here, but they started to notice some over here. So they were like, "Oh, that's weird." So okay, so it was being deflected by this bit in the middle, and then they thought, "Let's extend this a little bit further." And they started to notice they were still getting some detections over here, and as they keep going all the way around, they were still getting some all the way over here. Not many, just a few, but this meant that how strange that this alpha particle could go through there and then actually bounce back. This was a crazy idea at the time, but what they realized or what they decided was that this atom is that the atom, most of the atom's mass is contained in the very center, and it's positively charged because they knew that alpha particles were positively charged, and so the fact that they were deflected meant they were repelled, and so the nucleus must also be positively charged. And so that's when they decided, well, where are the electrons then? The electrons are probably orbiting around the outside, and they were right about that. Now there was more to that they're not completely right there, because we then a scientist named Bohr came up with the idea that electrons appear in shells, and then there was another guy called Chadwick, I think, who discovered that there are things called neutrons as well. But by this point, Rutherford and his colleague had just came up with the concept that atoms have a positively charged nucleus and that electrons are orbiting around the outside, and that the nucleus is tiny, 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 tiny in comparison with the size of the atom itself. So this is the last time we're going to really mention the electrons. We're going to be focusing just on the nucleus from this point onwards. Okay.